back to our second round. So the Sweet 16 rounds of the vertebrate groups. So our first matchup is going to be the brown pelican versus the great blue heron, two of our really large birds that are out there in the estuary. So I think this will be a really interesting, really cool matchup that we got going on here. The brown pelican, first off, it's one of the only birds of the entire diet, especially pelican-wise, is completely made of fish. They at one point they almost went extinct because of the use of DDT and other pesticides, herbicide type things. Same thing with like the bald eagles and the ospreys at one point. But they made that huge rebound, and they're also the state bird of Louisiana. So Louisiana did a big project to incorporate that species and bring that back, conservation statuses for those, and they are now the state bird of Louisiana, even on the state flag of Louisiana. That's kind of cool.
Thank goodness they did.
Yeah, right.
But
Really
they're going up. They got a battle ahead of them again, and this is against the great blue heron, which is one of the largest wading birds in the world. So pretty impressive. And you don't want to mess with a great blue heron. They've been known to put on defensive displays towards other birds and even people sometimes. The other thing about them is they're basically the trash can of wading birds. They will eat anything that's in front of them. Fish, amphibians, turtles, other birds. And there's even some populations of great blue herons that spend a lot of their time on land, and their main diet is voles, which are kind of like moles, like a small ground-dwelling mammal. Which is pretty interesting and not something that you think of when you necessarily
think of a wading bird.
Yeah, great blue heron. I mean, they're the trash can of birds, and they're a good contender against the brown pelican there. But let's move on to our next matchup. We have the belted kingfisher versus the osprey, which is going to be a really good matchup. And I'll give you some info about the osprey first. I think this is really cool. We talked about them last week. They're very good fishermen, and in fact, for most osprey, 1 in 4 times that they go after a fish, they catch them, but sometimes they have a 70% success rate in some osprey that we've studied over the years. The word osprey has its roots in Latin. We're not quite sure where it came from, but some people say that it came from the Latin word ossifragus. What a cool word. And that means bone breaker in Latin. And another thing they think it came from is bird of prey, which is Avis prede, which sounds a lot like osprey. So that could be the roots of the word, and I think that's just really neat. So I'm kind of gunning for the osprey here, but why don't you tell us about the belted kingfisher?
Yeah, so the belted kingfisher, also a very popular, important bird for our estuaries. Belted kingfishers, usually you're going to find them sitting on top of power lines. It's usually where most people see them. You kind of have that big old head. They're related to kookaburras, somewhere down the line there, which are pretty cool birds from Australia. But I think one of the more interesting things about them, even though we see them really high up sitting on power lines, predatory birds looking out from there, they will actually nest in the ground in burrows, which is pretty weird. So usually in soft clay or soft earth along an edge of like a lake or a river. So really cool bird groups there. Let's move on to our marine systems. So our next matchup is the bull shark versus the polka-dot batfish.
Oof.
Both really cool species. Me personally, I think bull shark is by far the coolest one out of those two. Sorry, fish people. But the bull shark has one of the strongest bite forces compared to body size of any fish that's out there, which is pretty impressive. Also, their babies can't handle salt water. So last week we talked about these bull sharks will move into freshwater systems all the way through. They've been seen like in the Peruvian Amazon, which is a long way away from the actual ocean, and they can handle freshwater really easily. They do that because they go into those freshwater systems, have their babies there. Their babies can't really tolerate salt water, so they have to build up a tolerance to that salt before they can move back out into the ocean from there. It's pretty interesting.
It's very interesting. I mean, I'm wearing a shark fin because I do love the bull shark, but I'm really conflicted here because the batfish is one of my favorites. This is a terrible representation of a batfish.
I did not draw that one.
But it's sort of, you can get the gist of it. They look very strange. As we said last week, they're kind of a frog gone wrong. But there are some really cool characteristics of a batfish and how they hunt. They are predatory, like we said last week. And one thing that a batfish does to catch its prey, it has a modified dorsal fin. So if you look at a batfish, it doesn't have a dorsal fin like most fish because that dorsal fin is modified to come out of the center of its forehead. And they call it an esca. They stick it out of their face, wiggle it around, and try to attract small prey items to get a little bit too close. And they have these large lips that they actually protrude outward to create suction, so that when those prey items get too close, they can suck them right in. So it's an angler, a fisherman. So if we got any fishermen out there that are placing votes, you might consider voting for the Batfish over the bull shark, as much as you probably like catching bull sharks. Yeah. Batfish are pretty darn cool. So we'll move on to the next matchup here, and the last matchup that we have, which is the Bottlenose Dolphin versus the American Crocodile. So both pretty iconic critters that you can be found here in Southwest Florida. And, you know, Bottlenose Dolphin took out the manatee last week, which was the postcard party. I mean,
yeah, I was kind of surprised by that.
Yeah, so that could have gone either way, but Bottlenose Dolphin came out on top. Like we said, they're one of the smartest critters we have out there. And one thing that I think is cool that we didn't talk about last week is that dolphins, you know, they have pretty good ability to hold their breath. Us as humans, when we take a deep breath, we replace about 15% of the air in our lungs.
My shirt's too tight.
Yeah. Well, Matt's currently replacing 5% of the air in his lungs with that bow tie on.
My face is so red.
Yeah. That's also red, if you notice. The dolphin can replace 90% of the air in their lungs with one breath, which is super impressive. And that's what gives them an advantage to be able to stay underwater and hunt prey.
Yeah, so best for last, the American crocodile. Reptiles, right? They're awesome. So the American crocodile, again, like we talked about, is a federally protected species here in Florida. You can really only find it in southern Florida, so Fort Myers down, throughout the Keys. But they are one of the most widespread of the four crocodilian species we have in the Americas. So that's North and South America. So the American crocodile does move down into the Caribbean, down through Central and South America. But here in the U.S., it is a protected species because we only have such a small area where these animals can actually live.
We're narrowing it down now to who will be the grand champion of the estuary. So I'm really torn about it. I know Matt is too. Place your votes. You'll be entered to win great prizes. This week at the end, when the votes are cast and the results come through, we're going to raffle off a kayak tour for 4 with an actual biologist as your guide. So we'll be back again soon. Signing off, I'm Ryan.
And I'm Matt. We'll see you.